What an Obamacare repeal would mean for Ohio. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Darrell Rowland, Public Affairs Editor for the Columbus Dispatch, Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Terry Casey, Republican strategist. Amid all the talk in Washington of ethics rules and Russian hacking, the possible repeal of Obamacare likely would have the biggest impact on Ohioans. Despite evidence it would be difficult to unwind, and amid polls showing voters want Congress to move slowly, Republicans seem set on turning back the Affordable Care Act.
We're working right now, the White House staff is, on a series of executive orders that will enable that orderly transition to take place, even as the Congress appropriately debates alternatives to and replacement of Obamacare.
The Republican plan to cut health care wouldn't make America great again. It would make America sick again and lead to chaos instead of affordable care.
Many Ohioans rely on the Affordable Care Act. Here's where the Obamacare plan stands in Ohio. Nearly 250,000 people get their insurance through the exchange. More than 700,000 people are covered thanks to Medicaid expansion, a key component of Obamacare. The percentage of uninsured Ohioans has dropped from 12% down to 6.5%, but it is getting more expensive. Premiums bought through the exchange will rise nearly 13% this year, and they have nearly doubled since Obamacare was enacted. Of course, much of those premiums and those increases have been offset by government subsidies. Sam Gresham, Democrats have been saying for years it's easy to repeal Obamacare, but replacing it is not going to be easy, and Republicans are finding that out right now.
I think it's going to be their albatross or their Waterloo. I think it's easy to have the phrase replace da-da-da. It's hard to do. And one of the factors that the private insurance companies really need is called a mandate. And if they don't get the mandate, they can't keep pre-existing conditions off the table. If you can't keep pre-existing conditions off the table, you can't give the mandate, then the economic reason for doing this type of insurance is now gone. Now, the fallacy is that if you have that many people uninsured, when you open up the gates for people to come into it, it's going to be the preponderance of people are going to be prior people with no health care at all, which means they're not in good shape. So I think the Republicans have a conundrum. I don't know what they're going to do.
Sam, I want to pick up a sports thing, not so fast, my friend, because if you looked at the bottom of that chart that Mike had on there, the premiums are going up, the costs are going up, and healthcare hasn't got any more affordable, which was supposedly the promise of Obamacare. So this needs to be fixed, and I think the Vice President-to-be summarized it pretty well. It's going to take some time to figure out all the details, but it's going to get done because we can't afford to go on business as usual with the soaring premiums and people getting hit with $5,000 or $6,000 deductibles.
Darrell, we've been down this road before, not us personally, but when Social Security was enacted, Medicare was enacted, they were controversial. Republicans largely opposed those things. They were challenged in court, but they're still here, and they really haven't been changed a whole lot over the decades. Is Obamacare going to go down that same path, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think it has quite the same support yet. It's still relatively new, quite frankly, and there's so much rhetoric, and frankly, there are genuine problems with it. Even Democratic supporters say, we want to, what's the phrase? Let's mend it, not end it. And hey, John Lennon saying how many years ago, you say you want a revolution, we'd all love to see the plan. So that's where Republicans are. It's easy to say on that campaign trail, we need to replace Obamacare. Or as Ted Cruz would say, we're going to repeal every word of Obamacare on day one. But people do like lots of the goody parts, but that's always been the problem with health care reform. Sure, everyone likes the goodies. Someone's got to pay the tab, and achieving that balance is the real trick here.
I think the good news is the president has picked to run Medicaid a woman from Indiana, and in Indiana, for the governors there, they had a plan similar to what we have in Ohio. So the new people coming in who are going to be running this, they recognize they've got to have a transition, and it's going to be a blend. I mean, Medicaid is not going to disappear. I think there's going to be a lot more grants, a lot more flexibilities to states to use their creativity to make something, because what works best in Ohio, we've got different circumstances than California or Wyoming.
But you saw the premiums there, Terry. In Ohio, those premiums have doubled. So,
but they're
is it
even
really
higher
working
in a lot of
Ohio?
other states, and there's a lot of the states that have no choice at all. They only have one provider. So it's a real mess what we've got.
No. Let's go back and let's say that again.
You saying it's all okay?
No, I'm not saying that. You focus on the premium. On the belly, under the belly side, there are people who are getting service who haven't got service. Now, when I go to receive my service, I get a lot of benefits that I didn't get before. They give me a piece of paper, tell me what I did and what I need to do. My systems are automated. I don't have to take a piece of paper to the pharmacist. I mean, there are a lot of underbelly improvements that people are now seeing. And fundamentally, there are lots of people who are getting service who were not getting service before. That's important.
And Daryl, those folks are getting insurance that they didn't have insurance before. They're paying hospitals who perhaps had to provide free care before. So you're seeing the doctors and the hospital associations suddenly running ads urging folks to keep Obamacare. Where have they been the past 6 years? Have they been there?
That's a
in
great
defending this
question.
law?
I mean, my understanding is that President Obama was counting on a lot more support from that sector than he was getting. But even here in Ohio, Governor Kasich obviously enacted Medicaid expansion, now, as you pointed out, serving hundreds of thousands who didn't have health care before. You know, that's making a huge difference, but in just getting health care, as Sam pointed out, but it's a lot cheaper to get treated by a doctor rather than use the ER as your GP, you know, as your general doctor.
right. Yeah.
So that's harder to document, but there are some cost savings here that might warm some Republicans' hearts.
And if you talk to people in terms of these deductibles, I mean, my son, as he looks at the healthcare thing, Obamacare is unworkable for him. So, I mean, for some people it
Yeah,
works,
but
some people it doesn't.
When Social Security came out, it needed to be tweaked in order to make it work.
And it's still going to need fixed in
And
the future.
Medicare, when it came out, it needed to be fixed. The difference is there was an atmosphere of people committed to the program who were willing to make those changes in order to get it done because of the policy here. And I'm going to tell you, it's a conundrum that if the Republicans are not careful, will be the albatross that drags them down. Now, one statistic, the Medicare expansion, the leading states, 6 states that have expanded with the largest number, were Trump states.
Right. And some states like Ohio, which probably leads into our next topic, in the next budget cycle, Ohio's got to figure out how to pay for that.
All right, let's get to that. Ohio lawmakers are back at work. We have a new Senate President, Larry Obhoff, who takes over for Keith Faber. Republicans have larger majorities in both chambers. Their calendar for the months ahead includes debates over green energy mandates, fracking taxes, abortion, and because it's an odd-numbered year, a new 2-year state budget. Darrell, what's the theme, the overarching strategy that Republicans have for this General Assembly?
Are you including John Kasich in those Republicans,
Not yet,
or just the legislature?
yeah.
Because I think and that's part of the story. I think we have two overarching strategies that don't necessarily overlap here. The Republicans, you know, for years they've wanted to cut taxes, and I think that's on the agenda again today. There's talking about reducing the number of state income tax brackets, maybe flattening the tax at the same time, things of that nature. Things are a little bit tighter this time around, though. I mean, Governor Kasich mentioned the R word, recession. You know, the budget requests are coming in. He, as usual, he asks for a flat budget or a budget with 10% cuts. This time around, there may be some agencies that get some of those cuts that will ripple down to Ohioans. So there's not necessarily that much room to maneuver back and forth with new programs or revamped programs or things of that nature.
Terry, Republicans say they would like tax reform. Now, true reform includes some tax increases as well as tax cuts. Will we see some increases in some tax brackets?
Well, the governor might want to do some shifts because the governor philosophically would like to get the income tax down lower in order to attract more jobs and businesses here. They've already abolished the estate tax. But part of the question for Ohio and other states face this too, do you widen the sales tax because there's a lot of services, other things that are exempt, But some of those things, like adding a sales tax on a funeral service, some people say that's a death tax, which it kind of would be. So there's going to be a lot of things played around, but the biggest problem the legislature has is Medicaid's going to cost more because the feds took away one of the sales tax gimmicks that Ohio did that provided more money back to the state treasury and the county treasury. So that's a big hole to fill, and then they've got to fill some things in terms of the cost of Medicaid. So the budget is going to be the big thing in the next 6 months, and Daryl, I predict you'll be able to get a lot of overtime if you're a dispatch reporter covering the legislature in the next 6 months.
I'm going to warn them. There's a guy named Brownback in Kansas. You remember what he did?
Governor
Right,
Brownback,
Yes.
Kansas.
He cut the taxes on everything and almost put the state in bankruptcy, and he had a revolt on his part from the Republicans.
But that hasn't happened in Ohio.
Well,
But to hit the same point, though, we've cut taxes for the past 10 years, and we're still lagging the country in job
right.
growth, though.
But we're doing better than if we hadn't, and we can
who
see
says
some.
we would have done better if we had?
I think it's pretty clear that we have done better.
Well, Republicans are stuck on tax breaks, and there's no scientific fact that shows me there's a correlation between tax breaks and income generated or job creation. Show it to me.
Sam, you need to talk to some business people who are way and moving to states like Nevada, Texas,
Those
or
guys
Florida.
strong-arm states anyway, and the logic that they use for getting money from states is not always that it's good for the state.
Well, but Ohio's had a lot of growth. I mean, we had closings of retail. Fortunately, this governor got a lot of jobs in from Amazon,
I'm going
which
to
is
say,
part of the
I'm
future.
going to say to you, the Medicaid expansion that they're messing around with, if they cut it like ACA, there are going to be a lot of rural hospitals that are going to go out of business because the DIS funds that were there before to keep those hospitals going, disproportionate funds for a disproportionate number of people who had no resources, they're gone.
Darryl, one of the things that came up this week was that Governor Kasich said he'd like to see congressional redistricting reform made a part of the budget. I know this is an issue close to Sam's heart. How can the budget reform how we draw congressional maps, which are severely gerrymandered right now?
Well, we should remind viewers, of course, that Ohio, in its constitution, at least in theory, well, it's there, it's not in theory, has a single subject rule. A bill can only contain one subject. And about every 20 years, the Supreme Court rolls out and slaps down some law because it violates the single subject. Other than that, things are pretty much fair game. And in a budget bill, if there's money going to it, and I'm sure you need money to support whatever the new plan would be, you could probably justify it. But more important, that legislative Republicans, who obviously dominate both chambers, have shown really no desire to go down this road. They did do legislative redistricting, but the last we heard from the House Speaker, he was talking about waiting to like 2030 to launch congressional redistricting.
And another prediction I'll make, Mike, is there's certain members of the Ohio legislature who might want to be a congressman in the future. They don't want to interrupt their future potentials.
And Sam, the problem you face is not just Republicans who don't want reform. There are some Democrats in very safe congressional districts who don't want to see those
I can name a few.
those
one
districts
in
become
Central
more
Ohio.
competitive.
Yeah, but last time it was put on the ballot, 70% of the people in the state of Ohio supported it. Now, that's a heck of a plurality. We think eventually, we're not going to get it through the House or the General Assembly to be put on there. We're going to have to do citizen initiative. And they made it much more difficult to do. But I assure you, if we get it on the ballot, we will have a possibility of passing this. And the logic is very simple. All we're going to do is take the previous bill that 70% of the people got and change one thing, General Assembly versus Congressional District. And we have to worry about the ballot board. So we're going to make the language as simple as possible. Now, you would be surprised who our allies are at this time. You just said the governor, he's interested in doing it. But there's some other Republicans who are interested in doing this too.
Would that campaign, Darryl, would it be more contested than the one we saw for the legislative districts? I'm assuming congressional candidates and sitting members of Congress would have some money and they'd throw against it.
I think you're right, and at least on kind of through the back door, at least, because even these ones with a 60% own party majority, you can never get enough. You can never have a safe enough district, even though arguably it's incredibly hard to beat an incumbent congressman in any state, but especially Ohio right
And there's
now.
egos involved. I remember one member of Congress telling me that when he went back to a colleague and said, "Oh, I got 58% of the vote." Well, I got 62. They love me more in my district.
Makes me worry.
Politicians have egos and they like to be loved.
Yeah, but I also think people are tired of being chosen by the congressional people. I think this needs to be, we have a district in Franklin County. In my opinion, it's a shame, but I know the person who has that district would kill me if I said something about that district.
I won't mention Joyce Beatty.
I didn't say George.
I know.
All right, let's get to the other battle, in the intra-party battle. The control of the Ohio Republican Party is now in the hands of Donald Trump and his supporter. In a setback to John Kasich, committee members today ousted chairman and Kasich ally Matt Borges and replaced him with Trump supporter Jane Timken as chairman of the Ohio Republican Party. Borges did everything right as chairman. He won just about every election he and the party oversaw. He brought the GOP convention to Cleveland, but Borges openly feuded with Donald Trump during the presidential campaign. That did not sit well with some Republicans, and Trump, who easily won Ohio, campaigned for Timken, even making personal phone calls on Thursday night. Terry Casey, Matt Borges, by all accounts, was a huge success. Why did your party fire him?
I don't know. Apparently, they handed him the wrong card. And instead of saying, "We fire David Pepper as Democrat chairman for failing," he did something different. But part of it, we're in an era where you've got Trump, you've got Tea Party, you've got establishment Republicans. And what's of interest, we don't quite realize as much in Columbus, but in Canton, Timken is the ultimate establishment name in terms of the family, the steel, the roller bearings. So it's going to be a delicate balance. Darrell was at the meeting, knows more than I do. But I think people are going to try and come together because Republicans recognize the 2018 election, senator, governor, attorney general, a whole lot of other things, is real important. And Republicans are in the majority, and they want to keep that control and do what they want to do.
Darrell, does this go deeper than Trump versus Kasich? Is it more, because Kasich, you know, he's ruffled some feathers by trying to tax drilling companies and things like that. The Medicaid expansion didn't sit well with a lot of conservatives. Does it go deeper than just Trump versus Kasich?
I think it does. And you know, as we tape this, we're maybe 3 hours from this actually happening. So Jane Timken just spoke to us reporters after the victory, and she talked about a grassroots revolution. I don't think that was the word she used, but almost a rebellion. They just feel like they've been neglected by the state party. Now that kind of goes hand in hand with the Trump, you know, attracting people who say they've been forgotten all these years, and Trump was sort of their champion. So, but it's not quite the same as you know, a rejection of Casey. But I don't see how else you can take it. It is a victory for Donald Trump. It is a defeat for John Kasich, because both were making the calls, working the crowd. That committee was, in essence, selected by John Kasich supporters to make Matt Borges chairman.
Some of them were, but I'll make a prediction. In 6 months, watch and see of the 66 members of the committee if any of them happen to become ambassadors or other top jobs in D.C. There might be some people who are moving to scenic places like ambassador to Barbados or to D.C.
Sam, is it nice to see another party disorganized and not the Democrats?
Well, it is, but my contention has been they're all disorganized, but because their purpose is enriching themselves and not improving government for the people. I told Terry earlier today that there's a disadvantage to being at the bottom. And the disadvantage for the party the advantage for the party that's at the bottom. There's only but one place to go, and that's to get better, all right?
But this past year they didn't. The Democrats sunk lower.
Well, be clear, I'm not a Democrat. I think they can do better. And I think because the pendulum swings back and forth, that will happen.
Darrell, what does this mean for folks who are not party insiders? How does the chairmanship of the state party affect future elections, policy making at the State House?
Very, very deeply. And the classic example that all of us, you know, sort of veteran political reporters point to is 1990, when Bob Bennett, one of the most legendary Republican chairmen in state history, was able to cut a deal between George Voinovich and Bob Taft that George Voinovich would run for governor in 1990. Bob Taft would wait his turn and run in 1998. And indeed, that's what happened. And Republicans had the governor's office for 4 terms and ended up sweeping the statewide offices. We're still feeling the impact of that deal that the chairman was able to cut. Now, I asked some party people about, the interesting thing is Jane Timken talks about she doesn't want to go in and put her thumb on the scale. So I don't know if that equates to, I'm not going to sort out this crowd. It's already lining up for governor in 2018 or what. But that's one of the interesting questions.
Somebody's got to be able to manipulate and position people, or the Republican Party is going to cannibalize itself. There's so many candidates.
Terry, I mean, we're 2 years from midterms. Midterms generally do not go well for the party that just won, which is the Republican Party. It's tougher for them. Changing the captain and with 18 months to go before the heart of the campaign, it can't be a wise thing to do.
Well, it wouldn't be your first choice, but on the other hand, it does motivate people to realize in Ohio, to an awful lot of Ohioans in different counties, different communities, governor who's in state government in some ways is more important and closer to them. So in some ways, this might be a motivation to pull together and make sure we're working together. So, I mean, after the meeting today, as I was told, there was kind of a joint thing with Borges and Timken and talking about working together. But clearly, Jane Timken, in a way, she worked with the outsiders, but she's also part of the establishment too. So maybe she has that unique ability to bridge both sides.
They tried to keep the conflict down by the way they structured the deal. That's not going to keep the conflict down. There are deep feelings. And Kasich is not a guy who forgets. Now, if you think he is, I can tell you some things I ran up against him in, and he never forgot.
Apparently Trump doesn't forget either.
Well, elephants are supposed to be people who remember things, right?
Well, speaking of John Kasich, he is in the fourth quarter of his 8-year run as Ohio's governor. He does not seem ready to start running out the clock. As we mentioned, he likely faces a tough budget battle with lawmakers. He just lost an ally as chairman of the state party. He promises to govern, though, with a heart, like he promised to during his unsuccessful presidential campaign, and he wants to Uberize state government. That is, he wants to use big data to target services where they are needed most. Terry Casey, now Uber has surge pricing during busy times. Are we going to have surge taxation with Uberizing state government?
Well, surge can be higher prices or can be lower prices, but I want to remind you of an important number, 770 plus. I don't know the exact number of days, but he's still governor for over 2 years, and he is full of ideas and energy and things that he wants to do, and some of them are things that some legislators might not like, but this is a governor focused on ideas, and the other part of it is having Republicans, including a lot of people. Paul Ryan went to school in Ohio, people like Pat Taberry, Steve Stivers. There's members of Congress in important positions, so there's ideas that he has for Ohio and that he'd like to see the federal government pass that would make it easier to improve things in Ohio.
But Darrell, the Republican majorities in the Senate increased, so they are in the House. So there is almost a veto-proof legislature now that would sort of counteract some of the things, like Governor Kasich vetoed the green energy mandate freeze. That could pass now.
Yeah, I think like John Boehner found out a few years ago, you can't have too much of a good thing. If you have that thin majority, you do want to hang together, I think, more. But now we've got 2/3 of the joint. I can go out and make trouble, or if I feel like I have to stand up on principle and oppose the governor's budget because of X, Y, or Z, I can do that. I think there's going to be more freedom to dissent. And just the dynamics, especially in the House, has the same leadership, but you got Keith Faber, the former Senate president, is going to be there, former Speaker Larry Householder, former Senator Bill Seitz, no shrinking violet to say the least. It's going to be a very dynamic House, and they'll get the budget first, of course.
I think it's a very dangerous time because power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think Darrell's illustration is once you have these positions, people tend to stake out ground for themselves, and the group is not unified as much as it could be.
Terry, I covered Mike Dukakis when he lost the presidency. He came back and he had a tough time. He had a Democratic legislature, but he got basically run out of town after the election. Is there some hangover from Kasich's presidential bid that's affecting how he can govern here in Ohio?
Well, there's clearly some legislators who want to do their own thing as opposed to the governor's thing. But if you manage it correctly, because if you're governor, remember you got a House and a Senate, and the House and Senate don't always agree on things. So if you're governor and you can manage that diversity, because there is a lot of varied opinions in both the House and Senate. So it's a different kind of challenge, but if you work it right and get people focused on, we got to be ready for 2018 and not shoot yourself in the foot, that could be a plus.
All right, got to get to our final off the record parting shots, and we will start with Terry Casey.
Technically, by June 30th, they must pass a 2-year budget. My prediction is there's kind of going to be a 2-year budget, but there's going to be some different things in there where they're going to have to come back and do fixes and tweaks, because as Congress passes things, including on Medicaid, that's going to give opportunities for Ohio to change it or needs to change it. So the 2-year budget won't be a 2-year budget.
Sam Gresham.
I think the opportunity for chaos among the Republicans is really great. People shuffling for state offices. I think the conflict that occurred today with Vorges and Kasich, it runs much deeper than people believe. And I think it's going to make it more difficult for them to come together.
Darrell.
In a way, mine's a little along the same lines. I sort of predict that on the future Columbus on the Record, we're going to be saying, why do we need Democrats with these Republicans? You got to have an opposition party built in. But with Kasich and his Republican majority at odds on congressional redistricting, severance tax, green energy, heartbeat bill, keep going down the list. And this is just going in. We don't even have the budget yet. Could be a very, very interesting year.
All right. Jerry Springer will be in Columbus in February. He's going to host a live version of the Price is Right game show. Come on down, he says. I predict that will not be his last trip to Ohio as he tests the water perhaps a little bit for a future run. The former mayor of Cincinnati. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.